reach out to me if you're having questions and we can go from there. Okay, I'm going to try and do something a little different today that I haven't done before, which is I'm going to try and tell the story of the unification of Italy and Germany at the same time. Normally what I do is break those up. So we do one day on Italy and we'll do a day or two on Germany in a regular year. But these two events happen simultaneously. They are overlapping events, and they are happening between roughly 1860 and 1870. Both these two countries, which if you look at our map behind me here, don't exist yet. So here we have obviously the peninsula of Italy, but there's no Italy there. And up here where there should be a Germany, there is no Germany yet. What we're going to look at today then, and here's the plan, here's the goal, here's the task. We're going to see if it works. We're going to talk about the unification of Germany and Italy as they are both happening simultaneously between 1860 and 1870 due to a series of wars, a series of events, and a series of important individuals. Before we do that, let's jump back really quick to our Congress of Vienna end of Napoleon lesson. And what I said as part of the Congress of Vienna is that Prussia, which is right here, okay, Prussia, which becomes the nucleus of Germany, the Kingdom of Prussia, led by the Hohenzollern family, Hohenzollern, the Hohenzollern family, is in charge of Prussia. They used to be an elector of the Holy Roman Empire. Now they're the kings of Prussia. That all happened during the War of the Spanish Succession, the final war between Louis XIV and the rest of Europe. Because the Prussians played a big role in defeating Louis XIV's armies in the War of the Spanish Succession, they were rewarded and they were able to change their title from the Elector of Brandenburg to the King of Prussia. A bit of long history. It doesn't really matter to our story here, but you've got the Prussian state, which is right there, not Russian, Prussian, starts with a P. Prussian state is right here. As a result of the Congress of Vienna, Prussia is given territory on the western side of what is called the Germanic Confederation. Napoleon, as we said, this whole area here that's outlined in red, Napoleon creates a thing called the Confederation of the Rhine. So all Germanic-speaking peoples are brought together into one big confederation that is governed by one of Napoleon's family members, and all the decrees come out in German and so on and so forth. So he unifies all those different states together under one government for the first time, which is based in the southern Germanic states, Confederation of the Rhine. After Napoleon, that gets changed into the Germanic Confederation. Same territories, but they just changed the name, with the exception of those pieces that are then given to Prussia right there on the other side of the Germanic Confederation. Now, why this is a problem is, like we said before, Prussia over here and Prussia over there are going to want to unite back and forth. They're going to want to amalgamate back and forth. And what's going to happen in order to create a strong Germany is we're going to see Prussia East and Prussia West go together and wage war against that whole red center part of Europe between 1867 and 1871. Also, as a result of the Congress of Vienna, Austria and the Austrian Empire right here is granted territories in the northern part of the Italian peninsula, primarily the two states of Venezia and Lombardia. Venezia and Lombardia are very, very important states today for Italy, and they're very important states going all the way back to the Roman Empire, because in the state of Venezia, or the province of Venezia, you have the city of Venice. Biggest port in southern Europe, most important, just like Hong Kong is incredibly important to China because it's their southernmost major port for international trade. Venice is the major port for international trade on the Mediterranean, and it's controlled by the Austrians after the Congress of Vienna. But Napoleon's work, Napoleon's wars over 1800 through 1815 have engendered a spirit of nationalism, engendered a spirit of unification in Italy and in the Germanic states. And what we're going to see is 50 years after Napoleon has been exiled to St. Helena, the nationalism that he inspired in Italy and inspired in Prussia are going to lead to the unification of these two countries. So that's just a little bit of background on that. Any questions so far on this? No? All right. Give me 1 sec. Got a bit of a rasp to my voice right now. I'm not sure why, so I'm just going to have a drink of water. Okay, so in 1860, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the Italians. In 1860, inspired by the events of the revolutions of 1848, which we haven't talked about, but revolutions of 1848 are inspired by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels with their Communist Manifesto. The revolutions of 1848 are also inspired by the growing ideas of liberalism, socialism, capitalism, trade unionism, the isms that I gave you yesterday. In 1848, you have revolutions all across Europe, with the exception of two states. The only two states that do not have a major revolution in them are England and Russia. And these are industrial revolutions. Okay, so not industrial revolution in the sense that there is growing technology and so on, but these are states that are industrialized, where the workers themselves are trying to overthrow the governments, trying to exert their influence and impact change in their government. So we have revolutions in Prussia, we have revolutions in Austria, we have revolutions in Italy, we have revolutions in France. We do not have one in England, because in England, the English government between 1830 and 1848 had actually begun to pass legislation to benefit the workers' lives, to make their lives a little bit better. So they allow for a minimum wage. They allow for a maximum number of hours of work that you can make people work at. There's a minimum age at which point you can be forced to go to work. So England has begun to make some concessions towards the rights of workers and make their lives better. So there's no revolution in England in 1848. There's no revolution in Russia in 1848 because Russia has not yet industrialized. So you don't have a trade unionism, you don't have socialism, you don't have liberalism, and those ideas of a working class that are beginning to agitate for change in Russia. So England avoids the revolutions, Russia avoids the revolutions, but the whole center part of Europe explodes in revolutionary fervor, which leads to a couple of different things. One, it leads to the overthrow of the Bourbon monarchy for the last time in France. 1848, Emperor Louis Philippe, who is the final French emperor. It goes Louis XVI, then Louis XVIII. After the Congress of Vienna, when Louis XVIII dies, his son Louis Philippe takes over. He is overthrown in 1848. And in 1848, Napoleon III is brought in, or Louis Napoleon, which is what his name is brought in as the leader of the state. By 1850, he will proclaim himself emperor, accepted by a plebiscite, call himself Napoleon III, and then you have this new Napoleonic empire that is created. The French, by the way, they have this. What do they call it? It's not the estate. The French are in their fourth. What's the word for it? Fourth democratic state. Anyway, the name, when I stop thinking about it, it'll come to my head. Because the French had been a monarchy for a long time. So the French were the Fourth Republic. Thank you, Gareth. So the French are in their Fourth Republic right now. The First Republic is between 1789 and 1804, when they have a republic. It's preceded by the French monarchy. Then they have the First Republic. Then you've got the Napoleonic Empire. The Napoleonic Empire is followed by the Bourbon monarchy again. The Bourbon monarchy is collapsed in 1848, and they have their Second Republic between 1848 and 1850. Then Louis Napoleon comes in, becomes Napoleon III. That ends in 1871. The Third French Republic goes from 1871 until 1940, when the French lose to the Nazis in World War II. Vichy France is then created, and occupied France is created, so they lose their republic. And then they go into, in 1945, the Fourth Republic, which is what they're currently still in to this day. Anyway, for a very short period of time, there is a republic in France, and then Napoleon recreates his own empire. The reason why I'm giving you all this background on that is because, as part of the revolutions of 1848, there is one particular area in Southern Europe that becomes very, very powerful. And that is this red section down here in the northern part of Italy. And this is the kingdom of Piedmont and Savoy. The Kingdom of Piedmont and Savoy is led by a man named Vittorio Emanuele II. So Victor Emmanuel II, and he's the king of Piedmont and Savoy. And he has a foreign minister. There's going to be two foreign ministers that are really important in all of this. Victor Emmanuel II, his foreign minister, his chief of the government, his #1 advisor, is a guy named Camillo di Cavour. And Cavour is all about unifying Italy, all about expanding the power of Victor Emmanuel II to try and take over all of northern Italy. In order to do that, he has to take over this territory here that is currently under the control of the Austrians, which means a war with the Austrians needs to be engineered. And Camillo di Cavour, between 1850 and 1860, really works to expand the influence and the power of Victor Emmanuel II, the king of Piedmont and Savoy, in not only this territory, and agitate towards Italian unification between this territory and Piedmont and Savoy, but also between the other states like Milan and Genoa, and so on, even as far down south as Rome. And in Rome, for example, at this point in time, Rome is controlled by the Pope. It's an independent city inside inside Italy. You have the Papal States that control the entire city of Rome, which is inside of a different Roman state, which is independent of Piedmont, Savoy, and independent of Austria. The Pope controls that whole area. You see all this, which is kind of interesting stuff. You see graffiti that goes up in the 1850s, all the way through the 1850s, 1855, 1860, and so on. And people are scrawling on the walls, "Viva Verdi." And if anybody knows Verdi, V-E-R-D-I, Verdi is a composer, classical composer, and he is the Pope's favorite composer. The Pope loves Verdi. So even though you would think the Pope would be anti-graffiti on the walls, when the Pope sees "Viva Verdi," like "Long live Verdi," the Pope's like, I agree, it's perfect. Now, here's the thing, though, is that the people that are writing "Viva Verdi" on the walls don't mean "Long live Verdi, composer." Instead, okay, the name Verdi is an acronym for, so people are saying "Long live Vittorio Emanuele Re d'Italia." In other words, long live Victor Emmanuel, the King of Italy. That's what people are propagandizing on the walls and writing on the walls and stuff all over the place in the 1850s. So there's a real push on the part of Italians, northern Italians, to unify together under their strongest king in 1860, who is Victor Emmanuel II. All right? I'm going to erase that because it's messing up my map right now. Don't need that up there. All right. Couple things happen in 1860 to get us started on the path towards unification. It's important to note that Victor Emmanuel and Camillo di Cavour are not really interested in southern Italy. There's a big difference between northern Italians and southern Italians, even to this day. My father-in-law is Italian. He's from the north, and he has some friends from the south, but a lot of the people in the north don't really like the people in the south, and the people in the south don't really like the people in the north. And whenever I go and hang out with my father-in-law and his friends at the old Italian Canadian club in Guelph or whatever, they'll just give each other the gears all the time. Northerners will attack the Southerners, and Southerners will call the Northerners different names and so on. So, like, for example, anybody south of Rome, my father-in-law just calls them Calabrese. So even though they're not from Calabria, they could be from anywhere in the south. They could be Nepalese, they could be anything else. You go, Calabrese. And for their part, all the people that are south of Rome that my father-in-law knows calls anybody north of Rome Tedeschi, which is German. So if you live north of Rome and you're a northern Italian, the southern Italians considered you're Germanic, blonde hair, blue-eyed Germans. And if you're south, they're considered Calabrese. You're all considered, you know, Southerners and so on. There's a real hostility between northern and southern Italy in a lot of ways. Some of it's regional and good nature, but some of it is legitimate. Camillo di Cavour does not have any interest in taking over southern Italy. Doesn't want it at all. But inspired by the revolutions of 1848, Sicily the island nation of Sicily, the Kingdom of Sicily, has been invaded in 1855 by a Sardinian by the name of Garibaldi, Giuseppe Garibaldi. Now, if you ever look up Italian unification, or if you go and you see statues, you really don't see a lot of statues of Camillo di Cavour. You see some statues of Victor Emmanuel II, but mostly what you see are statues of Garibaldi. If you ask a lot of Italians who's responsible for the unification of Italy, they'll say Garibaldi was. He's a revolutionary, he's a socialist, some would say a communist, inspired by Karl Marx, inspired by the revolutions of 1848. And what Garibaldi does is he leaves Sardinia, he invades Sicily, conquers Sicily, and Sicily gets turned into a workers' paradise. Once that happens, it's a very small jump from the boot, from the toe of the boot of Italy across to Sicily. So what Garibaldi begins to do is he works his way across into the southern tip of Italy, and his armies, his socialist armies, the people's army, begin working their way north, knocking off the manor houses and knocking out the nobilities, the ones that controlled that whole area, seizing all of these territories and growing and growing and growing in wealth and in power and in military might. Okay, so Garibaldi begins working his way up the Italian boot on his way towards Italy, and this is all in the late 1859 and early 1860 time period. At the same time, Cavour and Vittorio Emanuele have seen that there's a good opportunity in 1860 because of a number of things. First of all, Napoleon III is looking for foreign military alliances because he wants to legitimize himself. So he gives a alliance, a guarantee to Camillo di Cavour that if Cavour goes to war against the Austrians, that France will not back the Austrians in this case. Don't forget, Congress of Vienna is supposed to prevent major wars between the European powers by agreeing on certain things. So if France sided with Austria in an attack against Piedmont and Savoy would lose. But because Cavour is doing all kinds of backroom deals and alliances and all kinds of different things with the French, Camillo di Cavour and Vittorio Emanuele are empowered to attack northern Italy, this section right here, in 1860. So we have a war that happens in 1860 between Piedmont and Savoy into Austrian territory here, and at the same time you've got Garibaldi working his way up the boot of Italy with all of his socialist military forces. In short order, very, very short shrift, what happens is, I'm going to color it in the map here for you, within a matter of months, the Austrians lose control over Lombardia and Venezia. So all this territory then becomes the territory of Victor Emmanuel. And where's my black? There it is. Vittorio Emanuele and Cavour. They take over all this area here. Okay, so that becomes theirs. At the same time, they begin to work their way down and take over some of these other territories on their way down towards Rome. Rome is right here. Okay, so let's put an X on Rome. There's Rome right there. So now, in 1860, by the late summer, early fall of 1860, you've got Camillo di Cavour's armies, Vittorio Emanuele's armies, now down on the verge of invading Rome. At the same time, you've got Garibaldi's armies that have taken over all the southern part of Italy, and now these two potential adversaries meet near Rome, and the stage is set for a clash of the titans between the northern Italian army and the southern Italian army. Camillo di Cavour reaches out, sends a message. Garibaldi sends a message to Camillo di Cavour. The guy from the south sends a message to the guy from the north. And they agree to meet. Circle Rome right there. They agree to meet. And Garibaldi says to Cavour, listen, I know you got a big army. I got a big army. I know that you're powerful. I'm powerful. I know that you could wage war on us. We could wage war on you. Who knows who's going to win? So I tell you what we're going to do. I will give you all of southern Italy. I'll just hand it over to you. You can have it. Garibaldi offers to turn over all the stuff that he has earned and gained over years of warfare, liberating the South, just hand it over to Victor Emmanuel II on two conditions. first condition is that, well, let me see if you guys can figure it out. Anybody can jump in here. What do you think the two conditions are for Garibaldi, who is a communist military leader? What do you think his two conditions are that he wants Cavour to agree to in order to hand over all of southern Italy? Take a guess, somebody.
He wants democracy?
Good thought. Nope. He's okay with, well, to a certain extent. To a certain extent, yes, but he's okay with allowing the monarchy because Victor Emmanuel is a king. So a constitutional type monarchy for sure, yeah. But that's not the main thing he's looking for. Good guess.
He wants to keep Sicily?
Nope. He actually heads back to Sardinia and spends the rest of his life in Sardinia.
Some kind
Somebody
of
else.
insurance?
What do you think? Sorry?
Some kind of insurance?
No. Well, there's a guarantee. Yeah, he does expect a guarantee, and the guarantee he expects from Camille de Cavour is that if you go back on this, then I'll come back and wage war on you. So that's the insurance. Gareth, you just typed it in there, I think. Let's go back to the chat. Yes, he's a communist. What he wants is he wants guaranteed rights for the workers of southern Italy. Why did the southern Italians rise up against the landowners and rise up against the nobles? Because they want better lives. They want better pay. They want better jobs. They want better food for their families. They want more opportunity. So what Garibaldi says to Cavour is you have to take into consideration, even though you're a king, even though you guys are nobles, you have to take into consideration the fact that the southern Italians want more, and you have to give them some rights and some freedoms and some opportunities. If you agree to do that, then we'll put down our guns and we'll swear loyalty to Victor Emmanuel II. Also, because he's communist, what else do you think? Who do you think Garibaldi does not want to have any say in the running of Italy, this new Italian state, because he's a communist? Which group does he not want to have anything to do with it, the Italian state? Anybody? Who's one of those powerful people in Italy?
Dial 5502, Jack. Please dial 5502. Thanks.
Come on, folks. Sorry?
The Pope?
The Pope, right? Communism is anti-religion. Garibaldi does not want, and by the way, Victor Emmanuel is Catholic. Cavour is Catholic. He does not want the Pope to have any say in the running of the Italian state. So there has to be a very, very, very clear separation between church and state in Italy. If they do that, if they agree to isolate the Pope, keep the Pope away from the Italian state, and not let him have any say in how the government is run, if they do that, and they guarantee rights for the workers, Garibaldi will put down his guns and go home. And what Cavour says is, done. Good deal. So Italy is essentially united in 1860 by these two titans, Cavour from the north and Garibaldi from the south, without really a shot being fired between these two ideas, between these two different groups. So as of 1860, all of this territory now becomes the Kingdom of Italy, all the way down to Sicily. The Kingdom of Italy under Vittorio Emanuele II, with the exception of the city of Rome, which you see there as a black dot on our map. The city of Rome remains an independent city. And because of the fact that the Pope resides in Rome, and because of the fact that the French allowed, by making a deal with the Piedmontese, with Victor Emmanuel and Cavour, because the French said, yes, we will back your war against Austria, to guarantee this peace and to guarantee that the Pope in Rome is not incorporated into the new Italian state, even though Victor Emmanuel wants the city of Rome, there are French troops, 100,000 French troops are sent down into the city of Rome to garrison the city, to control the city, to make sure that it remains inviolate and does not become part of the new Italian state. Okay? But as of 1860, when you look at the map, We go from 1859, there's a whole bunch of states there in southern Europe. In 1860, they're all put together. The Kingdom of Italy is created, and now we've got a sixth power to deal with as part of the Congress of Vienna. All right, so this is what starts to change the balance of power somewhat in Europe, and is going to lead us a bit to towards World War I. Questions at all on Italian unification? It's kind of it seems really simplistic, seems really straightforward. There's a lot of machinations going on in the background, a lot of stuff I didn't really talk about. But any questions on how any of that works between the French, the Austrians, the Italians?
How did the lives of the workers improve because of that?
Yeah, well, so there's a constitution that is created. Victor Emmanuel becomes a constitutional monarch. So he's not a despotic monarch, and he'll remain, Italy will remain a monarchy until the end of World War II. In fact, it's Victor Emmanuel III who invites Mussolini to form a government in 1919 following World War I. So they're good to their word. They're true to their word. They provide opportunities. There's a constitution. There is a government, a parliament of sorts that meets and advises the king on how to run the state. So they do agree to the terms set by Garibaldi. So the lives of workers are generally improved. Northern Italy, though, gets more than Southern Italy does. And even to this day, if you travel through Italy, Northern Italy is wealthier. Has more opportunity, more job opportunities, more universities, higher standard of living, better education, like every sort of metric you can use to gauge a society. Northern Italy, Rome and up, is better off than Southern Italy. Southern Italy is much more impoverished, is much more rural as opposed to urban, much more agrarian as opposed to industrial. There's very few plants in the southern parts of Italy and so on. So Southern Italy, there is a lot of reasons why the Southern Italians and Northern Italians call each other names and look at each other as being different, because there are a lot of real socioeconomic and personal differences between the North and South. But in general, their lives improve as opposed to the way it was before. All right.
Is that why in Italy now they have way more vacation days than most other countries, and they have longer lunches? Is it because of that big uprising and that change in values?
No, again, Southern Italy, much like, and again, you've got a lot, if you look at a lot of the southern states in Southern Europe, so Mediterranean states, whether you're looking at Spain over here, whether you're looking at Italy, whether you're looking at Greece right there, all of them tend to have much more of a siesta type mentality. So, shorter workday, breaks in the afternoon, longer lunches, more vacation times, and so on. Yeah, the Italians have a lot of vacation days, but so do the Spanish and so do the Greeks. So I think it's more of a Southern European, Mediterranean mentality than it is particularly an Italian mentality. So, yeah. They do. I mean, and generally, as you work your way north in Europe, there are fewer vacation days. They don't have siestas, and they don't have long lunch breaks in Germany or Denmark or Sweden or Finland and so on. But when you get to Southern Europe, they tend to have that. So, all right. So 1860, we now have Italy is created, with the exception, this is going to be important, with the exception of the city of Rome, which is right here as a black dot. That is still an independent state. So Italy is not fully unified yet, but they are mostly unified as part of all this. Now, this brings us to 1864 and Prussia. So Prussia had been impacted by the revolutions of 1848, but unlike France, which leads to an overthrow of the government and the creation of a republic, and then the creation of a new popular empire, under Napoleon III, what happens in Prussia as a result of the revolutions of 1848 is that very, very strong conservative forces come into power. So any of the liberal forces, any of the forces that were pro-democracy or pro-workers or pro-socialism or pro-trade unionism get obliterated by the revolution of 1848. They lose, and a very, very strong anti-liberal, very strong conservative movement comes into power in Prussia, led by the noble class called the Junkers, which is Junkers. The Junker class of Prussia, very, very conservative, very, very traditional, very monarchistic. And the king of Prussia at this point in time, who is William I or Wilhelm I, hires as his chief advisor, as his chief strategist, much like Victor Emmanuel had Cavour. Wilhelm I hires an advisor for him, a man by the name of Otto von Bismarck. And Bismarck is a name probably some of you have heard before. There was a German warship in World War II called the Bismarck and so on. Otto von Bismarck is better known as the Iron Chancellor, and he is the person solely responsible for the unification of Germany between 1860 and 1871. When he's offered the position as Iron Chancellor, he says to Kaiser Wilhelm, he says, fine, I will run your government for you, but I want a couple things in return. What I want is absolute dictatorial authority over the entire government. So what I want is for the next 5 years, I want to be able to run and do whatever I want to do and issue decrees and policies as I wish. And Kaiser Wilhelm I says, sure, go ahead. Kaiser Wilhelm I is not terribly interested in ruling, but he is interested in power. And what he knows is he recognizes in Otto von Bismarck a kindred spirit, as Anne with an E would say, someone that has the same sort of goals in mind, which is more and more power centered in the hands of Kaiser Wilhelm I. Otto von Bismarck, for his part, is ruthless in centralizing power and increasing the authority of the king. So the two work together like, you know, peas and carrots. Everything is going fine. Otto von Bismarck in 1861 gives, to give you an idea of what his personality is, he gives a speech which becomes known in German history as the Blut-und-Boden speech, the blood and iron speech. And very famous speech, you can look it up at some point. Blut-und-Boden, B-L-U with an umlaut T, and then und, U-N-D, Boden is B-O-D-E-N. Blut-und-Boden. And what what Bismarck means by Germany will be united by blood and iron is the iron part is pretty straightforward. That is the industrial might of the Prussian state. Prussia finds itself, this is neither here nor there for our story, but Prussia has a tremendous amount of natural resources at its disposal. Coal, iron ore, all the essential things it needs for a strong industrial state. Also has lots of strong, fast-flowing rivers, which they can dam up and use to create various things. Prussia finds itself in a real advantage in the Second Industrial Revolution, which is going on at this point in time. The first industrial revolution began in the late 1700s, and it was a revolution of iron and a revolution of coal. That's the primary drivers of the power is coal, and things are made out of iron. Second industrial revolution begins, though, around the 1850s. Iron is replaced by steel, and coal is replaced by steam. And Germany finds itself in a strong position to create both all kinds of steam power and all kinds of steel. So that's what he means by the iron part. The blood part, what he means is we got to go to war. If we want to have a strong, unified Germanic state, we have to go to war and take over this territory. It's going to be ours. But, and here's where Otto von Bismarck's genius for Machiavellian flair comes in. Otto von Bismarck realizes that he cannot just go and attack the Germanic Confederation. Can't do that. Congress of Vienna says you're not allowed to wage war in Europe. Congress of Vienna says we can't allow these things to happen. We don't want the European states going to war with one another. So if he were to attack the Germanic Confederation in violation of the rules of the Congress of Vienna, then Prussia would find itself an outcast, a pariah state. They would likely be attacked by the Austrians, by the Russians, possibly by the French. This is not what he wants. So what he has to do is engineer opportunities for Germany or Prussia to be attacked. And if they're attacked by somebody else, well, then they have a right to defend themselves. And then under the guise of defending themselves, what they can do is wage war, use their very, very strong military, strongest military on the continent, not the biggest, but the strongest, best protected, best equipped, best trained, most emotionally connected to the idea. So the most dedicated soldiers to the Prussian state. His first opportunity to test out the Prussian military and to test out his theory that if we are in a defensive mode rather than an offensive mode, we will not run afoul of the rest of Europe, comes in 1864. And in 1864, the state of Denmark, which is right here, this northern peninsula, the state of Denmark finds itself in Bismarck's crosshairs because right between, and if you look here, right between Denmark and what will become Germany, there's this little territory here. And this little territory right there is called Schleswig-Holstein. Schleswig-Holstein. And this territory, much like a lot of parts of Europe that has been taken over by various states over the various centuries, finds itself allied and culturally similar not only to the Germans, but also very culturally similar to the Danes. So they speak a Danish-German hybrid, much like the Belgians speak a French-Dutch hybrid. So they have their foot in both camps, the German camp and the Danish camp. And the King of Denmark in 1864, King Christian IX, I believe, something like that, offers to the people of Schleswig-Holstein, who are part of the Germanic Confederation, but really not getting a whole lot of economic benefit out of this. Christian IX offers them, through a plebiscite, if they wish, they are welcome to join his kingdom and become officially part of Denmark. And if they do that, then they'll get all the rights and all the benefits of being part of the Danish state and go from there. Plebiscite happens. The people of Schleswig-Holstein, not getting a whole lot out of the German Confederation, seeing a good opportunity to actually improve their lot in life, say, yeah, sure. And they vote to join Denmark. Bismarck sees an opportunity here because ultimately these Germanic states are going to be under the influence of either Prussia or Austria at some point in the future. There are only two really big Germanic powers, right? You've got the Austrian Empire, which is here, and you've got the Prussian Empire, which is right there. Both of them are Germanic. Both have Germanic history and heritage and culture and so on and so forth. All of the states in the German Confederation, therefore, come under the influence of one of those two. And the vast majority of those German Confederation states really see themselves more the kinsmen of the Austrians than they do the Prussians. They're kind of afraid of the Prussians, the German Confederation, because the Prussians are pretty militaristic. And they're led by a guy who makes speeches about blood and iron. I mean, that's terrifying. So most of the Germanic Confederation is under the influence of Austria, but Bismarck needs to get control of that territory. To do that, thinking long game, what he has to do is weaken the influence of Austria in the Germanic Confederation. He has to make the Germanic Confederation realize that Austria is not on their side, that Austria really doesn't want to back them up. And he needs to do that by eliminating Austria as a major power or a major player in the region. This brings us back to 1864. 1864, Schleswig-Holstein, which, by the way, anybody know what Schleswig-Holstein exports? They have one major export in Schleswig-Holstein. No?
Is it some sort of alcohol?
Nope. Lego? No. Comes from Denmark, but not Schleswig-Holstein. What's a Holstein?
Either horses or cows. I'm thinking
Cows. That's what it is. They're cows. Yeah. So Schleswig-Holstein, they're farmers, right? They have like cheese and cows, and that's what they do. Like they're no threat at all to Prussia. They are not a military industrial power by any stretch of the imagination. So Prussia could very easily take its military and crush Schleswig-Holstein and Denmark on their own. Easy. However, that's going to look bad. If Prussia goes and beats the crap out of Denmark, which they could very easily do, they will look like the bad guys because it's a big power beating up on a small power. Right? It'd be like if you were walking home from school one day and some grade 2 kid mouthed off at you and called you all kinds of names. You know, you might feel justified in going and flipping that kid on its head and you know, roll him in a mud puddle. But most people are going to look at you as a grade 12 rolling a grade 2 kid through a mud puddle by his, you know, by his or her Dora the Explorer backpack, going, that's kind of a bit excessive. Like, shouldn't you be the bigger person and just leave them alone? You don't attack Denmark, right? People are not going to look. What have the Danish ever done to anybody? They didn't even invent Danishes, right? Anybody know where Danishes come from? Not Denmark. Anybody know? Austria. That's where Danishes come from. You want to confuse somebody at Tim Hortons? Go to Tim Hortons and order a coffee and an Austrian. And when they say, what's that? You go, that right there. And they'll go, that's a Danish. You go, no, it's not. It's an Austrian because it was made in Austria. It's not a Danish. What do you call it Danish for? It's like if you go and, you know, right, if you go to McDonald's, say, I'll get a Big Mac and I'll get some Belgian fries. What are Belgian fries? Well, those things right there. Well, those are called French fries. No, they're not, because they were invented in Belgium and they put mayonnaise on them. I don't understand why they do that. It's kind of weird. Everybody know where a croissant comes from? I'm getting sidetracked by food here. I haven't had lunch. Anybody know where a croissant comes from?
France seems like the obvious answer, so I'm guessing that's not it.
It's not it. It comes from Austria. The Austrians, most pastries, by the way, come from Austria. Austrians are really good at pastries. Brings us back to our discussion about the Sacre Torte. The croissant is actually ordered to be created by the Austrian emperor to commemorate the defeat of the Ottoman Empire's forces in the 17th century, so the late 1600s. So the defeat, it's actually in the early 1600s, it's during the 30 Years' War, 1630, somewhere around there. The Ottoman Empire attacks Austria. The Austrian forces then attack the Ottoman Empire, defeat them, and to commemorate that, the Austrian emperor orders that a new dessert be made to commemorate that, a new pastry, and that's why they create a croissant. Why do they create? How is that in any way commemorating the defeat of the Austrian Empire? Anybody? Think about this now. Think.
Is it because croissants are moon-shaped?
They are moon-shaped, and what has that got to do with the Ottoman Empire?
I think I've seen like a moon on like the flags and stuff, but I don't actually know what the symbolic representation is supposed to be there for.
Yeah. Anybody know why the Ottoman flag is a crescent moon?
Is it a religious symbol?
It is. Yeah. So it represents Islam, right? Which is why, by the way, you know, the Red Cross organization, which is all around the world, in the Middle East, the Red Cross is actually the Red Crescent. So it's not a Red Cross, which would, again, there's a reason for that, because a lot of the during the Crusades, a lot of knights and so on came down with red crosses painted on their white shields. It's not a good, you don't want to have a bunch of people going around with red crosses in the Middle East. So it becomes the Red Crescent in the Middle East. So what is a croissant? It's a crescent shape, and it's to represent the victory of the Austrians over the Ottoman Empire in the 1630s. Anyway, I got sidetracked by food there. The Danish don't do anything. They have done nothing wrong. So how do you avoid the rest of Europe looking at Prussia as being the bad guys for being these grade 12s beating up a grade 2? Bismarck's got an idea. What he does is he goes to Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria, who, by the way, will remain the Emperor of Austria until 1917 when he dies. He is the uncle of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So in our story, we're getting a lot closer now to World War I. Otto von Bismarck, as a representative of Kaiser Wilhelm I, goes to Emperor Franz Joseph and says, listen, Frankie, what's going on there in Denmark is not good for you and it's not good for us. What we don't want is we don't want all of these states here, these states that we have a vested interest in, that really should be under our control. We don't want these states floating away and going under the control of somebody else. I mean, the Danes take over Schleswig-Holstein. What's to stop the Dutch from taking over somewhere else? And what's to stop the French or the Swiss from coming in and taking over areas down here? We don't want that. We don't want non-Germans taking over German stuff. So here's my suggestion. Why don't you and I team up and we'll both go and kick the snot out of that grade 2 kid. And that way we can feel more justified. And if 2 of the members of the Congress of Vienna both feel justified in doing this, then maybe the rest of Europe will sit back and watch and not get involved. So he presents that to the Austrian emperor. The Austrian emperor says, let's do it. But before they attack the Danish, a couple things have to happen. Bismarck's got to make sure that the Congress of Vienna is going to be on side. So he goes to the Russians. And he says to the Russians, listen, do you guys care if we go and beat the snot out of the Danish? And the Russians look at this. Russia's over here. Denmark's over here. Russia goes, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. Do what you want. It's your territory. So he's got to go from one of them. Then they go to France under Napoleon III and say, listen, Nappy, do you mind if we attack the Danish? Because the Danish are getting a little bit uppity right here, and we don't like that at all. Napoleon III has got his hands full at this point in time with a war in Mexico. Don't ask. He loses. He says, I don't care. Go ahead. Do what you want to do. The only country that actually objects to Austria and Prussia attacking Denmark is England. But England is not about to commit any land forces or naval forces to defend territory on the continent. If France doesn't care, Russia doesn't care, and Austria doesn't care, what does England care? They're like, do what you want, I guess. We don't think it's a good idea to encourage the Prussians and the Austrians to start beating up on small Germanic countries, but what the hell? It's your country, it's your continent, I don't care. So nobody is interested in stopping Prussia and Austria from attacking Denmark, so Denmark's cooked at this point. But here's where we really get Machiavellian, okay? This is, again, we have to look at Bismarck. Bismarck does not care about Denmark. He doesn't. Bismarck wants these territories here. That's what he wants. He wants those territories in order to unite Eastern Prussia and Western Prussia together. And he really, really needs to knock these guys down a peg or two. Because Austria is really the country that can stop Prussia from going into this territory, since Austria shares a huge border with them. So Bismarck uses the attack in 1864 on Denmark to do a very Machiavellian thing. In the guise of being deferential towards the elder statesman. You know, Austria's been around a long time. Austria's got this long history of being an empire, blah, 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 blah. Prussia's the new kid on the block. What Bismarck says is, I tell you what we'll do. We will foot the bill for the war. So we'll put our troops in the field. You don't have to put any money into putting your troops in the field. We respect that. But out of respect for your leadership, out of respect for your long celebrated military history, we will put our armies under the control of your officers. So Austrian officers will lead the Prussian army into a war against Denmark. And Austria's all, you know, excited about that, saying, oh, thanks very much for recognizing that we are the best. Says, great, good deal. It doesn't cost them anything. Their officers are going to get all the glory because it's always the officers that get the glory, right? What was the name of the second sergeant of the 3rd Division of the 18th Platoon of Napoleon's whatever army? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. Napoleon gets all the credit, right? It's the guys at the top. So Austria is going to get all the kudos. Prussia takes on all the cost and all the risk. 1864, they go in and absolutely annihilate the Danish. Just crush the Danish. In 1864, Schleswig-Holstein is wrested back into the Germanic Confederation. The Prussians and the Austrians go, to the Danish, and then leave, and they go back. Question, folks. Why does Bismarck take on the cost, take on the risk, lose all the glory by putting his army under Austrian commanders?
Then if there's blowback, Austria would get more of the heat. Then
Good thought. Although don't forget, he's already made sure that there is no heat. Russians don't care. French don't care. English don't care. Come on. Why would Bismarck put the Prussian army under the control of Austrian officers?
were they wearing like Austrian uniforms?
Nope. What do you mean he isn't with the army, Gareth? Bismarck's not with the army? No. Bismarck is very much supported by the army. And the army's on board with this, by the way. Somebody other than Taylor or Patty or Gareth. Come on. Why would he put his army under the control of the Austrians? I'm going to wait until somebody figures this out. Come on. If the Austrian army is in charge, and the Austrian officers are in charge, what does that allow the Prussians to do? Because the Prussian officers are there, they're just not leading the army. What would the Prussian officers be doing there if they're not leading the army?
Watching?
Watching what?
Like the other officers? Like, I don't know, like learning from watching the war happen?
Yes! That's why. Austria is the big Germanic power on the continent. When was the last time anybody fought the Austrians, though? That was Napoleon, 1815. Prussia knows. Bismarck knows he has to go to war against the Austrians if he wants to get these territories. But he doesn't know what the Austrians' game plan is. He doesn't know what the Austrians are like. He hasn't seen the Austrians fight. So what does he do? He engineers a war against Denmark to allow his officers to scout the Austrian army. The Austrians want to make sure they look good, so they don't leave any of the tricks in the bag. They bring out all the big guns, metaphorically speaking, and they want to show that the Prussians, that we know how to lead an army, we know how to run things, we know how to organize our troops. And the Prussian officers just sit there the entire time going, okay. Oh, I see what happens there. When they do this, they're going to swing their armies over there. Yeah, got that? Okay, good. Watch for that. It's like scouting another football team, right? If you want to know what the football team plays, what their tendencies are going to be, if the quarterback drops back out of the pocket to his left, what are his most common tendencies? If the quarterback is right up underneath the center and it's the third down, third and short, or third and long, what are the tendencies going to be? Go and scout them, watch the game, watch the tape, and then you can see. Odds are that quarterback, he drops out of the pocket to his left, he's throwing it back across his body, or he's going to do a handoff, reverse to the right. He does it every single time. The Prussians now scout. They use the entire 6-month war to just sit there and go, got it, this guy does this guy does that. All right. And now, 1867, after a couple of years of training, Prussia is ready to attack Austria. Good so far? All right. Now, this is a problem. Congress of Vienna says you cannot attack one another, right? Britain's not allowed to attack the Austrians, not allowed to attack the French, not allowed to attack the Russians, not supposed to do that. But there's now a sixth power in the Congress of Vienna because by 1867, we got the Italians. So Otto von Bismarck, between 1864 and 1867, starts working the game, starts working all kinds of stuff, the entire diplomatic game. Here's what he does. He goes to the Italians under Victor Emmanuel II and says, listen, you've taken over some of this territory, but there's still more territories that you could have that are traditionally Italian territories, right? And the Italians say, yeah. And so what Bismarck says is, okay, in the event that, and I'm just spitballing here, I'm just talking off the top of my head, we're brainstorming. If, I don't know, theoretically, we were to attack the Austrians, and you were to attack the Austrians at the exact same time from the south. So while we attacked them from the north down towards Vienna, you attacked them from the south into their territory. They would be too preoccupied fighting us to fight you, and you could take those extra territories, so long as you didn't object to us attacking the Austrians. And the Italians are like, I like it. Sounds good. Sounds good. Good. There's one power down and out of the way with a secret alliance. Okay. Well, let's go to the Russians, because Russia shares a massive border with the Austrians. Any real war in this area is going to impact the Russians in some way, shape, or form. So you got to think about this really carefully. You don't want the Russian bear to get involved in here. You don't want them swinging in and causing all kinds of problems. However, playing into Bismarck's hands at this point in time is that this empire down here, the Ottoman Empire, is starting to collapse. So the Ottoman Empire by the late 1860s is known as the sick man of Europe. The empire has been around since about the 1200s, and it's on its last legs. It's going to go the way of the dodo. It's gone. By the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The Ottoman Empire, though, this is important for us to note, the Ottoman Empire controls all of these territories in Southern Europe, which collectively are referred to as the Balkans. So that is Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Transylvania, Moldavia, Macedonia, Greece. All of those territories, the Balkan territories, are all controlled by the Ottoman Empire. As the Ottoman Empire gets weaker and weaker and weaker, then what's going to happen is these territories here are all going to come up for grabs, and the Russians know that. Now, the Prussians don't care about those territories because the Prussians are a northern power, but Russia does have a border with the Ottoman Empire, and Russia shares a border with the Ottoman Empire across the Black Sea. So this whole area, which is Eastern Orthodox Christian, this whole area, which is far more in line with the Russian way of doing things. They have a Cyrillic language. They've got similar traditions. Think about all this area down here, okay, where you've got the Ukraine and you've got Yalta, etc. All that area is potentially up for grabs for the Russians. But because the Austrians also share a big border with that, the Austrians have an interest in going to that area and that territory. So what Prussia says to the Russians is, listen, both you and Austria want those territories, but, and I'm just spitballing here. I'm just talking off. I mean, we're just talking. We're just, brainstorming. If someone were to kick the ever-living crap out of the Austrians and weaken the Austrians dramatically, that might open the door for you to go in and take over those territories. But you'd have to be okay with somebody going in and kicking the crap out of the Austrians in violation of the Congress of Vienna. Theoretically. We're just spitballing. At which point the Russians say, theoretically, just spitballing? We're good with that. At which point Bismarck says, okay, good to know. So there's two powers out of the way. Well, now he's got to deal with the French, because the French also have a border with this territory. Bismarck goes to Napoleon III, who is now recovered from his diarrhea in Mexico and is back in France. Goes to Napoleon III and says, Nappy, listen, theoretically, if we're just spitballing, if someone were to attack Austria and take over Austria, and if you, in that theoretical war, were just to remain neutral, I don't want you to get involved. I don't want you to do anything. You just sit there and eat your pastries and drink your wine and don't do a thing. But if you were just to remain neutral, at the end of all that, I would be willing to grant you territory right here. And you can expand French influence, you can expand French power, French authority into the center part of Europe. All you got to do is stay out of the way. And Napoleon III says, I like it. It's a good deal. Now, Bismarck says, and he says this to all of them, all the powers. He says, okay, now listen, we're not going to shake on this. We're not going to sign anything. We're not going to write anything down. But I know that you know that I know what we're doing, right? And Napoleon III says, gotcha. And there's an important reason behind this. Napoleon III is okay with not signing anything because Napoleon III figures a war between Austria and Prussia is going to go on for years and years, which will weaken Prussia and Austria in the center part of Europe, which will then give more opportunity for him to grow and expand into Central Europe if those two powers get weakened. That makes sense why he doesn't sign it. Anybody have any guesses why Otto von Bismarck doesn't want to sign documents saying that he was going to allow France to take over territory in this part of Europe right here? Why do you think Otto von Bismarck would say, no, 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 I'm not going to sign anything? Because he lied. That's right. Liar, liar, pants on fire. His fingers were crossed behind his back. He has no intention of giving Napoleon anything because he wants this territory for himself. Why would he give this territory to Napoleon when he wants the territory for himself? All he wants to do is keep Napoleon out of the way. So the Italians on board, Russians on board, French on board, and Bismarck says to the English, I don't even care what you want. Because again, they're an island nation. They have their own problems at this point in time. And by the way, when the war actually happens in 1867, the English send immediate couriers to France and to Russia and to the Italians saying, oh, are we going to do something about this or not? And everybody else writes back, says, no, we're good. We're good with this. And so again, England says, fine, it's your continent, whatever. You guys don't want to get involved, we won't get involved. We'll just continue beating up on Africa and Asia, and that's what they continue to do during all this with their empires. 1867, Bismarck's ready to go to war. But again, he has to be the defender, not the attacker. He has to be with the moral high ground. So what does he do? He sends a message to Emperor Franz Joseph and says, listen, Frankie, war's going to happen. You and I, we're going toe to toe. We're having a dust up. It's happening. We're dropping the gloves. As soon as that puck goes, we're done. Now, you know, and I know that you're weak and you're old and you're tired. And you know, and I know, there's no way you can beat our army in the field. So why don't you just sign this peace treaty and avoid the war? Or you can say no, and when we defeat you after we fight, then we'll just ram this peace treaty right down your throat. Up to you, old man. And he deliberately insults Emperor Franz Joseph. Franz Joseph, predictably, declares war on Prussia. Because you don't do that. You don't call a guy out like that. He says, you want to go toe-to-toe? You want to dance? Let's go. And the Austrians declare war on Prussia. Now, there's one other little piece that Bismarck was hoping would happen. And luckily enough for him, it does. Prussia now declares war on Austria. Let me rephrase that. Prussia now declares war on Austria, which means that these troops from both these sides are going to have to come across this territory here in the north with their troops. There's no way Prussia is going to leave soldiers in that part of Prussia and not bring them into the war, which means they have to cross over the territory of the Northern German Confederation. Well, the Northern German Confederation now has to make a decision. Do we side with Austria and not let the Prussians cross our territory, or do we side with the Prussians and let them cross our territory? Remember I said to you before, the Northern German Confederation was fairly afraid of Prussia because Prussia was militaristic and Prussia was more aggressive, Prussia was more conservative. They don't find themselves having the same kindred spirit as they do with the Austrians. And so, when Austria declares war on Prussia, the Northern Germanic Confederation also declares war on Prussia. And they think that they're siding with the right side. They didn't. Prussia crushes Austria in 6 weeks. It's known as 7 weeks. It's known as the 7 weeks war. It's over and done with. They absolutely annihilate those forces. And as part of that, there you go. As part of that, when they defeat the Austrians, all of this territory here now becomes part of Prussia. So Prussia, by 1864, Where's my black one gone? By 1864, Prussia is getting closer to what we know as what it looks like when you guys did a map in grade 10 for the alliance systems in World War I. Okay, so here we have Prussia by 1867, sorry, 1867. At the same time, down here in the south, the Italians expand their territory. Take over the last port that they were going to take over. As part of that, so now Italy's got that swell to the northern part of it, so Italy gets more territory out of the war. Austria is badly, badly weakened by this war. And in fact, if you remember on your World War I maps that you did, the Central Powers, or the Triple Alliance, was made up of Italy and Germany, and not the Austrian Empire, but the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? The Austro-Hungarian Empire is created as a result of this 7 weeks war. Austria is so badly weakened by the war, and their power is so shaken by the war that in order to maintain control over this vast empire that they've got, what they have to do is they have to offer quasi-independence or semi-independence to the next biggest ethnic group inside the Austrian Empire. And so, as of 1867, the Austrian Empire becomes known as the Austro-Hungarian, spelled it wrong, Hungarian Empire. They have two capital cities. One is in Vienna, one is in Budapest. So one is in Hungary and one is in Austria. That's when they changed their national flags. Now they got the double-headed eagle, which I said you can see on the side of the Schönbrunn Palace. All that happens here now, 1867. So now Prussia has combined across the entire northern part of Europe by 1867, but there's still this last little bit of the Germanic Confederation yet to go. Well, that brings us to Napoleon, because Napoleon, when the war is all over, goes to Otto von Bismarck and says, hey, that was great. You guys did a great job on that. So listen, when can we start moving our stuff into that territory? And Otto von Bismarck says, what are you talking about? You're not, that's German territory. That's Germanic territory. It's German Confederation. You're not going in there. You're French. Napoleon says, yep, but you said that if we didn't do anything, then I could have that. And Bismarck says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, and I want you to shut up. Seriously, because what are you talking about? And Napoleon said, no, you said I could have the territory. Bismarck says, if you have a piece of paper or something with my signature on it, because I don't remember saying that at all. Like, why would I give you German territory? You're French. Stay on your French side of the continent. Napoleon is really angry. And Napoleon starts causing all kinds of problems. Otto von Bismarck in 1868 publicly then sends a letter to Napoleon III, which is published, and says, if you do not desist in these insane rantings, I will unleash the might and fury of Prussian nationalism on France. In other words, last chance, shut up, or we're coming for you. At which point Napoleon bites his lip and goes, but he's mad. And he's looking for an opportunity now to get back at Otto von Bismarck. So for the next 2 years, he's going to stew in Germans causing problems. And he's going to wait for an opportunity, which Bismarck will engineer in 1870. All right, last little bit, and then we're done. This is going to work out fine for the timing. So let's go back. 1860. Italy is unified with the exception of this little bit over here. 1864, the Prussians scout the Austrians. 1867, Prussia takes over all the northern Germanic Confederation, and the Italians take over that last little territory in northern Italy. Now all that's left is this chunk here that we have to deal with. It'll become part of Germany. 1870, Bismarck pushes Napoleon III over the edge. And what he does is he sends a message to Napoleon III. And this message becomes known as the Ems telegram, EMS telegram, because that's where it's sent from. Napoleon III has been causing problems. Napoleon III has been asking for all kinds of different things. And since 1868, very angry at Bismarck, he has been trying to get Kaiser Wilhelm I to make up for the fact that he was tricked in 1867 during the Austro-Prussian War, the 7 Weeks' War. And Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm I summons Bismarck to Ems, where he is there taking the soaking in hot pools and so on, and it's a spa town, and says that he asked Bismarck, what's going on? Like, I'm getting all this angry, like in today's day and age, I'm getting all these angry emails from Napoleon III, up and down, yelling back and forth that he's been wronged and blah, 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 blah. And Bismarck says, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And this literally happens. I'm just paraphrasing what they're saying, but this conversation literally happens. Kaiser Wilhelm I says, no, seriously, what's happening? What's going on? And Otto von Bismarck says to Kaiser Wilhelm I, do you trust me? And he says, yes. He said, have I ever steered you wrong in the past? He says, no. He says, I've got this. And Kaiser Wilhelm says, okay, you got it. And Bismarck now takes this opportunity to write an incredibly insulting letter to Napoleon III. Basically telling him to shut his mouth, be quiet. He's an irrelevant person that doesn't even matter. Nobody cares what France wants anymore. Shut it. We're not interested. And he sends this to Napoleon III. He also accidentally sends it to every major newspaper in Europe as well, who all publish it the next day going, holy crap, you see what Kaiser Wilhelm just said to Napoleon III? Napoleon III becomes the laughingstock of Europe when he sees this. He has to do something about this. You can't just sit there and get insulted in front of the entire continent who are all looking at you. It's like if you remember back when we used to have people in a cafeteria, right? And if two people were going at each other and one person launches an incredibly good burn at the other person and everybody watching that goes, oh, right? And what do they immediately do? They turn to the person that just got burned going, huh? What's he going to do? Something's going to happen. This is going to be good. The rest of Europe goes, huh? What's going to happen? Napoleon III has to do something. France has been insulted. He's been insulted. So what does he do? 1870, Napoleon III declares war on Prussia. Now, notwithstanding the fact they had a hard time fighting the Mexicans and lost to the Mexicans, France is not ready for a major war against Prussia at this point in time. It takes time to mobilize your forces, to organize your forces. About 4 to 6 weeks probably to get all your guys together and organize them and get them out in the field and move them where you want them to move them to. Don't forget, we're in a time period where we're pre-telephone even, right? We're pre-Morse code. So how do you get your messages across? You got to send runners out. You got to send horses out. It's going to take you a while to get people where you want them to be. So Napoleon III declares war on Prussia and then issues his mobilization orders. However, Otto von Bismarck, prior to sending the Ems telegram, which he knew would knock Napoleon III for a loop, mobilizes the Prussian army and sends them right there. So the Prussian army is now sitting on the border between France and the Germanic Confederation and Prussia. And as soon as Napoleon III declares war, Otto von Bismarck goes, and the next day, there are Prussian boots on the ground in France. France is scrambling, trying to get its troops together, trying to figure out what's going on, and the Prussians are rampaging across northern France. They're heading right here now towards Paris. There's Paris over there. As part of this particular attack, what does Otto von Bismarck do? His troops go in 2 different directions. They attack here, and they attack here, across that territory. Why south and why west? Because he wants the rest of the Germanic Confederation, and he uses this war as an opportunity to do it. And he has to go in within 6 weeks. Paris is captured. The war is over. In 6 weeks, the French lose to the Prussians. Catastrophic loss. Humiliating loss for France. This ends the second and final Napoleonic Empire, ushers France into its third republic. And as a result of this, let's just do a little bit of erasing here. As a result of all of this, a couple of things happen. Okay? Keep those in the black one. Here we go. As a result of all this, this whole area now becomes, as of 1871, that becomes Prussia. Prussia forces Kaiser Wilhelm I and Bismarck force the French government to sign a peace treaty to end the war in 1871. A couple of important points about this particular peace treaty. Okay, I'm going to erase this up here so you can see it. There are a whole bunch of clauses, a whole bunch of terms, but there are 4 really important ones that are part of this. Okay, number 1, because France started the war, France has to pay for Prussia's territory, for Prussia's war costs, because it costs a lot of money, to kill and beat up you French people. So you have to pay for the war. So France is forced to pay reparations. So French reparations to the Prussians, to Germany, to the tune of $1 million. That's what it costs in 1871 money for that particular 6-week war. France has to pay reparations for the territory. Number 2, because the Germans don't trust the French any further than they can throw them, they really shouldn't throw anybody with their bad back. France will be occupied until they pay off that war debt. So France is occupied until the debt is paid. Number 3, because the Germans don't trust the French any further than they can throw them, they really shouldn't throw anybody with their bad back, they take some territory from France to make sure that France can no longer attack them in the future. And as a result, France loses Alsace and Lorraine. 2 important coal territories right here on the border. And finally, because France started the war, because they were the ones who declared war, France has to accept blame for the war. Four big important terms. There's a lot of other things that come out of it. This is several hundred terms in this particular treaty, but these are the big 4. France has to pay for the war. France is occupied till they pay the reparations. France loses Alsace and Lorraine. France has to accept guilt for the war. Anybody know in which building this particular treaty is signed? Come on. In what building, famous building in France, is this treaty of 1871 signed?
Palace of Versailles.
Yes, it's signed in the Palace of Versailles. So this treaty becomes known as the Treaty of Versailles, 1871. And as part of this particular treaty, one of the final things in the treaty is that in Versailles, in the Hall of Mirrors, the state of Deutschland is proclaimed. So it's no longer Prussia, but Kaiser Wilhelm I, the King of Prussia, is now Kaiser Wilhelm I, the King of Germany. 1871, Treaty of Versailles, in the Hall of Mirrors, humiliating treaty for the French. This is going to be important moving forward, folks, because the French are so devastated by this, so humiliated by this particular treaty, that they spend the next 40 years looking for any opportunity they can to get back at the French, at the Germans, any opportunity. And they find failures and they find humiliations and nothing really works for them until 1914. And in 1914, when France could have played a role, could have been the calming voice in Europe, instead, France jumps off the deep end with both feet going, yes, to get back at the Germans, wage World War I against Germany. As you know, when World War I ends, Germany loses that particular battle. Well, what's the treaty that ends World War I called? Come on.
Also the Treaty of Versailles?
Treaty of Versailles. Where is it signed? In the Hall of Mirrors at the Treaty of Versailles. Huge treaty. Lots of terms in the Treaty of Versailles. But there's a couple of really important points to the Treaty of Versailles. Number one, Germany loses Alsace and Lorraine because the French don't trust the Germans any farther than they could throw them. They really shouldn't throw anybody with their bad back. On top of that, Germany has to pay reparations to France. But it's not $1 million this time. After World War I, Germany has to pay $820 billion. $820 billion is what they have to pay to the Allies for the war. And because they don't trust the Germans any further than they can throw them, Germany will be occupied until they pay off their war debt, or they'll lose territory until they pay off their war debt. And most importantly, because Germany started the war, according to the French, Germany has to accept blame for World War I, which will become known as the War Guilt Clause, Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles, 1918. Now, Treaty of Versailles, 1871, left such a bad taste in the mouth of the French that they sat there for 40 years going, I got to get back at those damn Germans. Well, guess what the Treaty of Versailles 1919 does? Leaves such a bad taste in the mouth of the Germans that for the next 20 years, they go, we got to get back at those damn French. And that's what Hitler uses to get elected in 1933. That's what Hitler uses in order to rebuild the German military in 1935. That's what Hitler uses as a launching of the war in 1939. History repeats itself because of the angers and the hatreds and the misdemeanors of the past. Okay? But anyway, by the time we get to 1871, we now have the map here on the board that you're probably familiar with, or at least more familiar with from grade 9, if you remember that, or grade 10. This is the Russian Empire, Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, France. We have all the major players now ready for World War I. Oh, one last quick little thing. Remember I told you that Italy, Rome was still occupied by the French, so it wasn't part of Italy yet. But Rome is now part of Italy, right? Except for the Papal States, except for the Vatican. Well, what happens? 1870, when France is attacked by the Prussians, there's 100,000 troops down here. Well, the French need those troops in order to fight the Prussians because they're not doing well. So Victor Emmanuel says, listen, Nappy, why don't you take your troops, take them back to France, and we'll watch the city for you. We'll protect Rome, and then when war's over, you can come have it back. And Napoleon's like, really? You do that for me? You guys are so nice. Like, yeah, sure. Just go. We'll watch it. Not a problem. Off you go. So the French troops leave in 1870, and the Italians take the city of Rome. So by 1871, Germany's created, Italy's created, Austro-Hungarian Empire is created. We are now ready for World War I. Questions on this very, very chaotic period of European history between 1860 and 1871? No?
You early on you talked about there were a bunch of revolutions in 1842.
1848, yeah.
1848. Can you expand on those a bit more?
So yeah, those are again the assignment that I gave you last day, looking at the isms. So those are inspired by the liberalism, the communism, the socialism, the trade unionism, all those movements that are rising as part of the Industrial Revolution across all of Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. So all the revolutions of 1848 fail to achieve their objectives, but all the revolutions of 1848 do have a huge impact on shaping the future of Central Europe. So like I said, it's going to spark the rise of the Napoleonic Empire, which will lead to the collapse of the French monarchy for the last time. It'll lead to the rise of Italy. It certainly leads to a strong conservative push in Prussia, which is what results in Otto von Bismarck being brought into power.